Hello and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride, and joining me at the desk tonight are regular guest Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. Chris, how are you this evening?
Good evening, Kenneth.
Very good to have you here. And using my Sunday name for some strange reason. But anyway.
I was just practicing my use of the English diction. Apparently it will come in handy for us later on.
Yeah, well, on that note, there has been widespread condemnation in Scotland of the UK government's immigration plans as industry bodies representing tourism, farming, fishing and care work say Westminster's refusal to take into account the country's unique population challenges make an unarguable case for a differentiated Scottish scheme after Brexit. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, described the plans as devastating for Scotland's economy and called for powers over immigration to be devolved to the Holyrood Parliament, as she proposed last month in a policy paper setting out her own plans for a flexible Scottish visa to deal with the country's falling birth rate and ageing population. Underlining his support for an alternative Scottish visa, Mark Crothall, the Chief Executive of the Scottish Tourism Alliance, described the Westminster plans as the biggest threat to Scotland's tourism industry. The industry accounts for 1 in 12 Scottish jobs, and around 1 in 5 posts in the sector are filled by overseas workers. Warning that the plans would hit rural Scotland hardest, Crothall added, Scotland's situation is unique. We have very fragile areas in our economy, and it's more important than ever that we're able to attract and retain people, particularly in the Highlands and Islands and other rural areas. And Scottish Green MSP Ross Greer said, the racist immigration plans outlined by the UK government today are appalling and will simply devastate the Scottish economy. Immigrants enrich our communities, they are our friends and neighbours, they staff our public services and keep sectors like tourism and agriculture going. Yet again, the Tories seem to have chosen a policy almost tailor-made to damage Scotland. And Chris, I mean, I think those comments from Ross Greer are maybe the most pointed that I've heard, and actually making the point that is most important to me, is that this is not just about workers. We shouldn't just be thinking of this as a flow of labour. These are people, and people who often have very good reasons to want to come to the UK, and family reasons, friends, just an interest in being here. And I don't think we should be looking at it just as a question of workers, even though, as everyone else has said, all those other quotes, it's going to put a big strain on a lot of sectors in Scotland.
Particularly the hospitality tourism industry, as has been pointed out, but as well as that, you're looking at social care, you're looking at nursing, you're looking at a plethora of sectors which are going to be, there is no other word for devastated. That is exactly what it is, and it is foolish to suggest otherwise that Westminster knows what is best for Scotland. I mean, the people of Scotland know what's best for Scotland. So for people like Jackson Carlaw and Annie Wells and all the rest of it to, go along with this ridiculous stance is just, honestly, it's fanciful. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the care sector is going to be affected here as well. Donald McCaskill, the Chief Executive of Scottish Care, said he was already seeing a huge change post-Brexit, with workers from India, the Philippines and Pakistan believing that the UK, and by extension Scotland, had shut up shop. And this is one of the things that I think we haven't talked enough about around Brexit, is the perception of what Britain is now. Well, Britain had previously been considered quite an open country, quite a welcoming country, and now it's increasingly being seen as, well, we're not even welcome there, so why would we think about going?
Yeah. I heard an interview earlier on today about a woman in Edinburgh who owns her own publishing house, and she relies heavily on the Erasmus programme, which is bringing people over to obviously learn the trade, which is fully funded by Erasmus. Right, I'm talking about fully funded. They pay their wages, right? Something like up to 35 hours a week. The EU pay, and these people just simply are not coming now. She had, I think, roughly 5 or 6 planned for this year, and 4 out of those 6 are not coming. And she will not be able. She will have to. Basically, she will have to. She will have to adapt the strategy that Broadcasting Scotland have to adapt, insofar as she will have to heavily rely on volunteers. And it's just simply abhorrent. You know, because these people are now and I know personally from my own experience with my refugee work in Calais and Dunkirk. Listen, refugees don't want to come to Britain. They see Britain as for what it is. It is becoming a racist state. You know, and if somebody tells you, hey, you're not welcome here, you're going to go, right, okay, I'm not welcome there, I'll go somewhere that is. You know, so I mean, this is the way that it's going. It's frightening now. Think of what it's going to be come January next year, when basically, as was quoted by one Tory MP, the drawbridges go up.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about how this isn't what Scotland needs. I mean, but really, it's not what England needs either. I mean, England has the same issues with NHS staff, like nursing, care staff, a lot of hospitality staff as well throughout England are in exactly the same boat. They're people who've come from Europe, very often some of the poorer countries in the EU, have come here to try and make a living for themselves. And now, again, they're going to be kept out. But what do you think England gets out of this, and what do you think the reaction will be in England if this does really start to affect some of those key sectors?
It is going to end up in civil unrest. You know, I mean, I listen to LBC on the mornings, and it's James O'Brien, who I think is an absolutely fantastic broadcaster, journalist. And there was one chap was having a rant at him, saying that he didn't recognise anyone in his own high street anymore. You know, and James was trying to say to him, well, why don't you try and... This guy was clearly uptight, you know what I mean? It was, you know, he was on a... just totally off the Richter scale. And he suggested, well, why don't you be more accommodating and be more... You know, welcoming and you know, and engage with these people. And he was overtly racist. He was like, I don't want to engage with them. You know, they're not my people. I don't want them. And this guy went on to an absolute tirade of abuse. He called James a slag.
Charming.
Charming. And, you know, James, in his own inimitable fashion, then, you know, retorted back to him that sat well on his shoulders because he was part of the liberal elite that was feeding off the rest of the country.
Well, obviously, you and I are both part of the liberal elite as well here, arguing for daft things like not being really racist.
Yeah, but I mean, the rhetoric that is now coming out of England at this moment in time is overtly racist, and this was done. The whole chat of Nigel Farage and all the rest of it, that was a prelude to where we are now. You know, they fueled the current state that we're in just now, and people are now starting to go, oh, I really don't like this.
And of course, I mean, it's not just Nigel Farage and the Tories. I mean, Labour, it was Gordon Brown with his British jobs for British workers, and Ed Miliband with his controls on immigration mug. You know, this is something that's taken over politics as a whole in England, whereas in Scotland, even the Tories pay lip service to the positives of immigration. What do you think the difference is there? What is it about Scotland? Because when you look at things like the social attitudes survey, you find that actually, you know, attitudes to immigration are broadly similar across both countries. So what is it about the political culture in Scotland, do you think, that's different?
Well, it's the I hate to bring up the the West Coast sectarianism, because that is heavily reliant on, you know, Britain and Empire and Britannia and all the rest of it, and that seeps in to the narrative, which is aided and abetted by people like Murdo Fraser. You know, when he comes out with his tweets of, you know, the Queen's 11 and stuff like that and all the rest of it. That's not helpful. And his partner in crime, Professor Tompkins, yes. You know, he does... he engages in similar content.
Yeah. A lot of kind of dog whistling.
It is very much dog whistling politics. And it's... It really is nasty, but that's all they've got to cling on to. This, you know, this dream of empire, you know, which is overtly white supremacist. You know, and Scotland has always been a welcoming country, and not just in Scotland. You know, you go as far away as dare I say Hong Kong, Beijing, Philippines. You walk into a bar, you will undoubtedly hear a Scottish accent. Do you know what I mean?
That might say more about our drinking habits than
well,
about
yes,
well,
actually, it also espouses our natural willingness to be friendly and to be open and to engage with different cultures. You know, so I mean, gladly, we don't have people like the guy that was on James O'Brien in Scotland.
We don't have so many of them anyway.
They're not as prevalent as what they are down south. And, you know, I mean, there was another chap as well, I couldn't believe it, he was in the middle of one of these flood areas, and he was like, I believe in Boris Johnson. I want Boris to come up and, you know, I'll buy you a pint. And I'll tell you, you know, you drink that pint and I'll tell you what's needed for this area regarding flooding and stuff like that. And the reporter said, yeah, I don't think there's much chance of him coming up. And by the government's analysis, you're only granted £500. And he said, £500 will not even fix my freezer, mate. You know, and he was like aghast at the fact that that was all that was on offer, £500. And yet these people vote for him.
Yeah, it is a strange thing, and it's something that people on the left often ask: is how is it that working class people become Tories? Because it's clearly almost always voting against your own interests. So what is it that that makes people? What is it you think that makes people avoid the left? I mean, although again, as I say, the left hasn't necessarily put up the most most strongest anti-racist argument.
Yeah, it's something that I'll never understand. Because, you know, I mean, I haven't been supportive of the Labour Party since sadly John Smith died. And he was the last socialist prime minister that we never had. After Smith's demise, it then took us into the Blair years, and they almost capitulated to the centre right. You know, aided and abetted by Gordon Brown, as you pointed out, and it didn't get any better once Gordon Brown got into office as well. And Jeremy Corbyn was seen as, to my mind, I think he was seen as something that was quite fearful for the not the hard left, but for left-thinking people. He was seen quite radical, and they didn't really want to rock the boat too much, and they naturally thought that they would be able to claim their country back. This rhetoric of claiming their country back. And again, I go back to James O'Brien when he asks, you know, what do you mean by claiming your country back? How has the EU taken your country away from you? And nobody can answer that. Because the EU are not responsible for that. You know, this narrative has been created by the right-wing media which has been fueled by the Brexiteers, the ERG group, because they want to hold on to the past. They want to hold on to their land of hope and glory and, sense of empire that, was from 18th, 19th century. But you look at the working standards of the 18th, 19th century, you're pretty much looking at the same working standards today. Things haven't moved on a great deal to my mind. And it's because I personally think that socialism isn't really practiced as, as the way that, I would perceive it to be. Certainly not under Gordon Brown, certainly not under Tony Blair. And the country hasn't been allowed to dabble in socialism because it is geared towards the right-wing corporate companies basically exploiting the working class and holding a foot over them and saying, this is the only way to go.
Yeah, it's that famous Thatcher thing, there is no alternative. This is just, and that's exactly what Blair that's the path that he followed. This is just how the economy has to be run, and there isn't another path. We are just going to move on now a wee bit to something you were talking about, finding Scots all around the world. And a new report today by Momentous Change shows a significant number of people globally continue to view Scotland's brand as friendly, trustworthy and ethical. Momentous Change, the consultancy firm established by former SNP MPs Roger Mullen and Michelle Thompson, conducted the research behind the report to examine how Scotland can utilise its huge diaspora around the globe to develop Scotland's trade and influence. Ivan McKee MSP, the Minister for Trade, said, "I welcome this report from Momentous Change, which shows a significant number of people globally continue to view Scotland's brand as friendly, trustworthy and ethical. The report also offers excellent insight into how we can continue to strengthen our global presence overseas through our diaspora, who are invaluable in generating business, trade and investment opportunities. Despite the challenges we face as a result of Brexit, the Scottish Government will strengthen our international ties and continue to work to support exporting businesses and develop international links." And Kingsley Aikens, who has led the development of the Irish diaspora for many years, commented, "Congratulations on a timely, frank and important report on the Scottish diaspora, which underscores what a formidable underutilised resource the Scottish diaspora represents. What was striking in this landmark report was the realisation that lost actors can become national assets, and the diaspora can play an important role in nation branding for Scotland. In a world where major powers are looking inwards, small countries like Scotland and Ireland need to do the opposite and build global networks of affluence and influence. Key now is to build on this encouraging report and put policies, programmes and projects in place to build on the potential." And Chris, I'm sure this is exactly the kind of thing you would be glad to hear.
Welcoming, definitely. There's actually a piece in question here that I can link in, which is quite good. There was a report in the New European today that an English watchmaking company has decided to move to Scotland. I think it was Perth. Basically, they have moved lock, stock and barrel from England to Scotland because they view Scotland the best chance of being back in the EU.
Wow. Well, that's fascinating.
And, we are looking for more companies to take that leap of faith, and have the vision that they've got. It may only be a small company. I think they only employ between 70 and 90 people. But 70 and 90 people, Scottish jobs are...
That's still
I hate to be overtly racist, but they're a lot better than 70 or 90 jobs in England.
Well, yeah, it's a lot better for us, certainly.
But again, reading about this... and what Ivan was pointing out there is that what I was saying to Gordon the other night there is that, Scotland has opened up various trade hubs and stuff like that throughout Europe to sell, obviously, the Scotland the brand, but Scotland the country, and Scotland the people.
Yeah.
I think that's been hugely influential from the EU. Viewing Scotland as wanting to participate in that programme, and that whole chat from Alan Smith about the EU leaving a light on for Scotland, it only bodes well for us going forward. I was at the All Under One Banner thing on Saturday, and I was reinforcing the fact there was an awful lot of negativity. There was quite a wee bit of negativity towards the SNP, I have to say, because of people's impatience. But the overarching thought was that people weren't too 100% sold on the fact that Nicola will call a referendum this year. And I was exasperated because I personally believe that it is going to happen. I'm perfectly happy to be put in my place. Somebody to turn around to me and say, "Nya, nya, 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 it didn't happen." But we've only got 2021 to have a look at it again through the prism of the election, the Holyrood election. So it's not like we are tied into Westminster for eternity. Scotland has got a get out clause, and the more that we see that the Scottish Government getting on with the day job by selling Scotland, further afield, it only bodes well for us going forward and leaving the rest of the UK, behind in the dark ages. Yeah,
I mean, I believe there's something like 20 million people in the US who describe themselves as Scottish.
Yeah.
And obviously in Canada there's a huge number. I mean, there's more native Gaelic speakers in Canada than there are in Scotland.
Aye.
So, all of these factors, what do you imagine we can gain by kind of utilising that diaspora more?
We can draw on that experience. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the mass migration of my immediate family who worked for Rolls-Royce in Hillington. Back in the 70s, it was just, Rolls-Royce just opened the Canadian doors, and just, anybody that wants to go, we'll pay your tickets, we'll relocate you, offer you a package. And that's why it doesn't make up the sum total of all the people in Canada, but it certainly accounts for a fair few.
A fair chunk, yeah.
I mean, Rolls-Royce was a hell of a employer when it was in Hillington, and then latterly it moved out to East Kilbride. And as I said earlier, and I wasn't joking, by saying you walk into any bar and you will hear a Scottish accent, and our own migration of skills, has throughout centuries have been at the footfall of other countries' evolution. You only have to take a look at the amount of Scottish people that worked on the National Opera House in Sydney, or the amount of Scottish people that worked on the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, dare I say they were possibly there, working as navvies in the Eiffel Tower.
We took football to Brazil, for goodness sakes.
Well, allegedly. Pity enough we've never been able to beat Brazil right enough.
It cost us in the end, but
that's just true. You look at golf, throughout the world and stuff like that, and they've all been used to sell Scotland, and whether it's through natural industry, whether it's through film and television, whether it's been through media and marketing, financial sector, stuff like that. Scottish people have always been, because we have naturally got this welcoming dare I say, attractive personality. That we don't wish anybody any harm, and we wish to learn.
Yeah.
We are more reticent to actually learn. I know from my own personal experience, if I go to France and I try and speak French, the French will be quite sort of like, some of them will be quite, open
bless
to it.
you for trying.
But I'm fully conversant in Italian, and I know when I go to Italy, I even got commented on the fact that my accent was actually quite unique and quite, sort of like Siciliano. So I get that, and I'm quite happy with that. So when people see that you're trying and you're reaching out, they're more welcoming, towards you.
So. On that note, when my sister lived in Geneva, she was told by somebody that the sexiest thing in the world is French spoken in a Scottish accent.
Oh, there we go.
So there you go.
Maybe.
Anyway, moving on. A senior advisor to the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, has said that the EU's relationship with Canada is a different ballgame and that the UK could not expect the same kind of trade deal. This week, the UK government's trade negotiator, David Frost, gave a speech in Brussels calling for a Canada Free Trade Agreement type relationship. He said that to think that we might accept EU supervision on so-called level playing field issues simply fails to see the point of what we are doing. But as the two sides prepare for the start of negotiations next month, Stefan de Rink highlighted the UK's physical location in Europe compared with Canada as a key factor, as well as warning that the trade talks could get rather difficult. The key aide also repeated what has now become an EU mantra, that a tariff-free, quota-free deal is not possible without the UK committing to a level playing field on state subsidies, environmental protections, and workers' rights. And this, this story, I think that quote from David Frost is maybe the most telling one. Said that to think that we might accept EU supervision on so-called level playing field issues fails to see the point of what we're doing. Now, the Brexiteers' argument was always this self-contradictory idea that the only way we can have better trade is to separate ourselves from the EU, but the EU will somehow have to concede to everything we want because they want trade with us. And it just fails to understand. They say failing to understand what Brexit is about. No, they understand perfectly well what Brexit is about. They understand that Brexit is separating from the EU, and therefore the more you diverge, the less trade you're going to be able to do with the EU.
Well, it's that exact word that you just used there, diverge, and it's exactly how much divergence is going to come into play, because to your average Brexiteer, Brexit is not Brexit if we have any ties with the EU whatsoever. And when they were talking about Brexit, they didn't talk about level playing fields at the same time. No. They just said, we want to get out of the EU, we want nothing to do with the EU. And that brings me back to the conversation that this guy had with James O'Brien, is the fact that that's not his vision of Brexit. His vision of Brexit would be the fact that Britain is back on its own. We are foraging in the fields for our own stuff. You know, the old dig for victory, dare I say, back in the 1940s.
I'm curious how long it'll be till we have that.
Self-reliant on tins of Spam and corned beef from Brazil. And ably backed up with chlorinated chicken and whatever bloody hormonal treated beef. And we are going to be self-reliant, and we're going to stand on our own 2 feet. And the other thing that gets me about the whole Brexit thing is their single-mindedness of independence.
Yeah.
That Britain has, Britain wants to be independent.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Scotland wants to be independent. So why are we not dealing with this? And it's their overlording.
Yeah. It's just that inability really to see Britain as a normal country like every other, isn't it?
Well, they don't want it to be another country like any other. You know what I mean? They want to be uniquely and quintessentially Scottish. British. And we want to be quintessentially and Scottish. Yeah. But they won't allow us to do it because there is still this us and them mentality within Britain.
Yeah.
Which says we are better than you. You're second-class citizens, and you will be treated, as such. The further we go down this line of divergence, we've seen today with the emergence of this Australian points-based system and stuff like that, which is absolutely horrendous. It is, overtly racist. It is overtly racist, and it reinforces my darkest fears about Brexit. Is that it's not about taking control of your country. It's not about re-energising your industry and all the rest of it. It's about keeping immigrants out.
Yeah. Or driving them out.
And driving them out. It's keeping them out and driving them out. Because as we know, or as we have now learned, this 30,000 cut-off, this 30,000 a year cut-off, that's not going to help the average person that works in the social care sector.
Not.
It's not going to. It isn't going to help your average waiter, bar person, waitress in the hospitality sector.
Even most nurses.
Most nurses as well. I was going to be flippant and say nobody is going to pay somebody £30,000 to hand you a scone and clotted cream with jam when you're, spending your millions as you bus your way around the Highlands and Islands. Yeah. It's not going to happen. No. And equally, I hate to be really brutal, but nobody is going to pay £30,000 for somebody to wipe your daddy's backside if he's sitting in a care home. Yeah. They're not going to do it. Show me someone who went to Eton who is prepared to put a dozen bricks on his back and walk up a ladder in order to lay those bricks. Yeah. It's not going to happen. You've got I can't remember the chap's name. He's in charge of the NFU Scotland. He was in a polytunnel outside Dundee or something like that today, and he was basically saying this 10,000 extra migration that the Westminster government have allowed is not going to go near the 70,000, 90,000 that Scotland needs alone. Yeah. And things are going to be are going to have to come from abroad. Yeah. You're not going to get Scottish strawberries, I hate to add. You're not going to get Scottish potatoes because there'll be no bugger to lift them out the ground. And that is the way that it is going.
Yeah. It's something we will just have to keep watching. But as you say, this is as the EU and Britain diverge, inevitably, these things are going to get worse. We're going to move now to the United States, where former New York mayor, owner of the Bloomberg TV network, and 12th richest person in the world, Michael Bloomberg, will appear at his first Democratic primary debate tonight in Las Vegas, ahead of the Nevada caucuses this Saturday. Bloomberg, who is not even officially on the ballot in any of the first 4 states, has met the polling threshold set by the Democratic National Committee and is in first or second place now in many polls. Although he has been in the race for several months now, Bloomberg has not appeared at previous debates because he did not meet the required number of donors. Bloomberg is not taking donations from the public at all and has spent around as much of his own money as all the other candidates combined to establish himself in the race. Several candidates argued that he was buying his way out of having to face them on the debate stage, but the removal of the donor threshold has upset other Democrats who see the rules being changed to give further prominence to a multi-billionaire, but were told the rules were unchangeable earlier in the process when they asked to ensure that more people of colour were on the stage. Bernie Sanders, the independent senator from Vermont, remains the frontrunner both nationally and in Nevada. So, I mean, that last line I'm sure will bring a smile to your face.
Definitely, yeah.
But how do you feel about billionaires buying their way into the most powerful job in the world? Should we just? I'll just leave you alone for the rest of the show.
Just let me gibber in a corner. And again, it feeds back into just exactly what we were talking about there. It's the right wing who are buying their way to supremacy, and it's horrendous to see that. We think that we're in. We think that we're in a bubble at the moment in Britain, and you just look across the pond and you think, oh my God, because you can see how you can't see it in Britain at the moment, but if you look at, you're far more knowledgeable in American politics than I am, but if you look at America and you see how everything is controlled by the right-wing corporations. And you've got a billionaire that's just wandered in there
who
and
owns
said,
his own TV news network.
Who just wanders in and says, I've got the cash, put me on the podium. And
I mean, it's almost like if Rupert Murdoch were just to say, right, I should be Prime Minister because I can afford to outspend everybody on advertising.
It could be argued the fact that Rupert Murdoch is actually the Prime Minister, and he's only put Boris in there
just as his hand up Boris Johnson's backside.
You said it, Kenny, not me. I mean, yeah, because and again, I'll go back to something that you said a couple of months ago. If you look at Britain, right wing. You look at Australia, right wing. You look at America, right wing. There's a common theme running through here, and it is corporate greed.
Yeah.
And that is what it is. It is pure and simple, unadulterated corporate greed. And it is at the heart of politics. It's at the heart of central governments, not just in this country, but in America. And again, make no mistake, I'm not saying that the EU is a land of milk and honey.
No.
There is interference from the right wing as well. You look at Russia, the way that it's been controlled, although it's viewed as a socialist state. It is definitely, it's all about, is there such a word as right-wingism? but it's more like controlling right.
So very authoritarian.
Right-wing corporate governance, because it doesn't want interference from any other possible factor. Now, you've got clear interference here at the top of American politics, and yet nobody seems to be batting an eyelid.
Yeah, I mean, we could very well be in for a battle of billionaires to become the president, as if billionaires weren't already, overpowered, On the other hand, though, you do have Bernie Sanders now really settling into a lead. He really does seem to be becoming quite firmly the front runner here. As I said, Bloomberg is leading in a couple of state polls, but Bernie Sanders is leading nationally and in most of the state polls that have happened. What do you think of the possibility of America electing somebody who describes himself as a socialist?
Never going to happen in my lifetime, I don't think. It's about as likely as we're going to get a socialist prime minister in Britain, and unfortunately, the narrative of Trump, I'm going to open I'm going to reopen the coal mines. I'm going to
build a wall,
reinvigorate the steel industry. I'm going to put the car manufacturing back on the map. I'm going to build a wall at Mexico. And it's all America first, and it is, and Boris Johnson is looking at that, and that's why he's coming out with the mantra of Britain first, draw up the drawbridges, because he can see that the right wing values are appealing to you would fairly be safe to say the majority of the working population in America. But just some reason, I always feel my own personal feelings is and I hate to be brutal here, folks, but socialists are always pissing up against the wind. Do you know what I mean? Because money talks, and money wins 9 times out of 10. Right-wing corporations will never stand up for ordinary working people who believe in the ethos of the redistribution of wealth. They want to exploit the workers who believe in that ethos because they have no alternative. Do you know what I mean? And not since the days of Nye Bevan and Clement Attlee and stuff like that has Britain even dabbled in sort of like real socialism. And it scares an awful lot of people, but you have that badge of honour of being one of the members of the liberal elite.
It's interesting. I mean, we will have to just keep watching. This American primary race has got a long way to go, but the battle between Bernie Sanders, the socialist, and Bloomberg, the billionaire, is genuinely fascinating, and I think we'll say a lot about where America is going to go in future. But still in America, U.S. Attorney General William Barr is considering resigning over President Donald Trump's tweets about Justice Department investigations, a source familiar with the situation told the Reuters news agency. The department said he was not leaving. The Attorney General has no plans to resign, Justice Department spokeswoman Kerry Kupik said in a post on Twitter late last night. The Washington Post separately reported on Tuesday that Barr has told people close to Trump about his concerns, but it was not immediately clear if Barr had spoken to the president directly. He has his limits, the newspaper quoted one person familiar with Barr's thinking as saying. Barr may be sharing his position with people close to Trump in hopes the president gets the message and stops tweeting about Justice Department criminal investigations. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. Trump earlier on Tuesday said he had total confidence in Barr, who last week told ABC News in an interview that Trump's tweeting habit had made it impossible for him to do his job. I do make his job harder, I do agree with that, Trump told reporters before boarding Air Force One yesterday afternoon. The Attorney General is a man with great integrity. And I don't know how much you know about William Barr, the Attorney General. He has given some very interesting legal advice to the president. He has stood by the president while he has tried to assume more power. He's one of the people who argued very strongly that essentially presidential power in the US is unlimited. He's made a number of very odd decisions, and yet now, like with so many of Trump's allies before now, people who we thought were his close, loyal, inner circle, it seems like he's finally getting to the end of his rope and thinking, I don't know if I can deal with this guy anymore.
Well, yeah, because, up until now, he's been sort of like, the way that I see it is that he's been keeping up pace with Trump. And he's been, as you say, very supportive, about Trump. But the one thing for me is that you have got no control over someone who has got control of a phone that can just basically gibber complete mince, there was a thing on social media the other day there, and it was a cartoon of Donald Trump, and he was lying in bed tweeting, stuff like that. And it was like something out of Simpsons, you know what I mean? He's sitting there in his underpants and stuff like that, and he's tweeting away about something, you know, and has... on one side of his head it said cuckoos, and the other side I can't remember what it said, but it was basically poking fun at the fact that, you know, when he's in charge of his phone, he's not in charge of reality, and therefore, you know, people are playing catch up with him. Do you know, they're shitting themselves to wake up in the morning thinking, God Almighty, what's he said during the night?
During the night, yeah.
Do you know, because, you know, and there is that sort of like, I can't keep up anymore routine, you know, and Barr's obviously got to the point where it's like, I don't want to go to sleep, you know what I mean, in case he comes out with something outrageous, and I've got to either, you know, back him up, or I've got to calm it down and, you know, and play it cool.
Things,
So, you know, there comes a point where people get to the end of their tether.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we've seen with the likes of Trump, people are very disposable.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And he will have no misgivings about showing Barr the door.
Yeah.
If he's not playing ball.
Well, that's his whole thing, isn't it? You're fired.
Yeah. And you only have to look at Boris Johnson turning around to Sadi Javid and saying, if you don't like it, it's my road or the high road.
Yeah.
Because I've got somebody in that's willing to do it my way.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he will not lose one wink of sleep over that decision.
No.
And it's because he's been told by someone else, you know, who's been told by someone else, who's been told by someone else, whose name starts with M, Murdoch, that this is the way to go.
Yeah.
And it is following the, you know, I mean, Trump's a loose cannon. Trump makes his own mind up. He doesn't answer to anybody.
Yeah.
But in Britain, because we are constantly playing catch up with America, we're just looking over the pond going, oh, is that what Trump done last night?
That how we're doing
we'll
government
just follow
now.
suit. Yeah.
Anyway, back in Scotland, a set of immediate actions to further increase the availability of period products has been confirmed, as Communities Secretary Aileen Campbell announced support for the general principles of the Period Products Free Provision Scotland Bill. Regulations will be brought forward to place a duty on local authorities to provide products in schools from the next academic year, and the Scottish Government will work with clinicians to explore how people with medical issues such as endometriosis are able to access period products by prescription. Other actions include supporting Hey Girls to develop a locator app that helps people access free products, promoting wider period dignity through a certification scheme for the private sector, campaigning to remove the stigma surrounding periods through the current #TalkPeriods campaign, and reviewing wider community access to ensure period products reach those who need them most. So, Chris, this bill has been trying to work its way through Parliament. The SNP wasn't necessarily supporting it at first, but they are now saying they're behind the basic principle. They're probably not going to support this actual bill, but will presumably produce something of their own in good time. Now, this has got to be good news. This is something I remember first hearing my sister and one of her pals talking about this in probably about 1991, and saying, this is absurd. Why are we paying for this? This is just a tax on being a woman. And when we know the impact that it has on education, girls not going to school because they don't have access to the products they need. You know, women just finding that they've got to choose between their tampons and food. You know, sometimes. This is a really big issue, so I'm sure...
It certainly is, and I would actually advocate the Scottish Government to go one bit further. I'm talking to a female friend of mine about this situation, and it's, you know, more to do with the expense, not the availability, as you know, you quite rightly point out. And these companies, these clinical companies that produce sanitary products, they need to be brought down a peg or two with the amount of money that they charge for the products. You know, that could be seen as, you know, critically unfair. But what I would like to see the Scottish Government do is to actually, you know, I mean, why not build a factory to produce low-cost sanitary products that you know can be made available, free to everyone. Yeah. You know where it's required. We had a report a couple of weeks ago where there are certain things that are now no longer available in a food bank. Yeah. And you know, sanitary products are part of it.
Very big one, yeah.
Powdered baby milk as another one, and you know. You could argue the fact that I personally think that powdered milk should be available free for children, and you know, and you're absolutely right. It's an unfair tax on just for the fact that you were born female. You know, it's not like. You know, you get guys saying, "Oh well, if they're getting free stuff, I'm wanting free hair gel." Yeah, do you know what I mean? It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, my friend. Do you know what I mean?
No, and we should give a lot of credit to Monica Lennon, who brought this bill forward, and to Women for Independence, who this has been something that they have been talking about in great depth, done a lot of research, a lot of lobbying to try and make this happen. So all credit to them. And yeah, I mean, we just have to hope that the Scottish Government's proposals do whatever they can to make this better. Because, I mean, sitting here as two men, feel a wee bit daft talking about this, but it is just a simple injustice that women should spend, I mean, it's tens of thousands of pounds over their lifetime. Yeah.
But I don't think that we should feel daft about discussing it, because, you know, maybe it was perceived daft back in the 70s, but now, you know, as the report points out, that it is, you know, now a subject that can be comfortably discussed.
Yeah, we shouldn't be kind of hiding from it. Just having two men talking about it. Not ideal.
I know exactly what you're saying, but you know, I mean, my friend Suzanne McLaughlin has done a great amount of work with the Scottish Women for Independence, and as you point out, Monica Lennon, I think, you know, has been absolutely consistent on the ball with this, and it is a debilitating issue. Yeah, it can be. You know, which could actually restrict people from leaving the house, and therefore it looks on to the fact that it affects their employability. Therefore. Affects their
big impact
social
on education,
interaction, education as well. So it is definitely a welcome step, but I would advocate that the Scottish Government go a wee bit further and actually think about, you know, the investment that could be made.
Absolutely. You know. Yep. So, figures published today by the Scottish Government show the employment rate for disabled people in Scotland has steadily increased since 2014. In 2018, the employment rate for disabled people aged 16 to 64 was 45.6%, an increase of 4.2 percentage points since 2014. Over the same period, the employment gap between disabled and non-disabled people decreased by 2.4 percentage points. Fair Work Minister Jamie Hepburn said, "Everybody who can and wants to work should have the chance to find rewarding jobs. I am determined that we do everything in our power to address inequality in the workforce and ensure disabled people are supported to have fair and sustainable working lives. I welcome these figures showing that progress is being made, and I recognise this is just the beginning. The figures also show that around a quarter of disabled people who are currently economically inactive want to work. We will continue to work across government with employers and other partners to support people into employment and to address the barriers disabled people face. Our forthcoming progress report on a Fairer Scotland for Disabled People Employment Action Plan will outline the key next steps. This includes continuing to press for the devolution of services and resources to support disabled people to enter and sustain employment." And I'm just going to tack on our final story here. This is disabled people will continue to be able to lease mobility vehicles under Scotland's new social security system. Scottish Government has accredited the charity Motability scheme to provide cars, wheelchair-accessible vehicles, scooters and powered wheelchairs that can be adapted to meet disabled people's needs. The service provides access to a wide choice of vehicles at affordable rates without the need for credit checks for people who receive a disability benefit at the appropriate rate, meaning users only have to cover fuel costs. So again, that's some good news generally for people with disabilities in Scotland. Both the Motability scheme being approved through the Scottish Social Security system and increases in employment for disabled people.
Well, it's tremendous to see the. We were talking about earlier on. We were talking about divergence, but it's nice to see the Scottish Government diverge from the UK mantra of taking Motability vehicles off of people and stuff like that. I think that was famously done under Theresa May. You know, look, it shows the amount of willingness that the Scottish Government are wanting to make Scotland a more inclusive society.
Absolutely.
And you know, and that means you know, able-bodied and disabled-bodied people, you know, to be able to have a reasonable sense of social interaction and you know, being able to contribute to society. And you know, I think it's a fantastic thing. The Motability scheme, I think it's up in Mary Hill. It was next to the what do they call it now? I can't remember, but there's a massive big garage area. You know, where these specially adapted motors are, and you know, as a welcoming. I was going to say addition, but it's not an addition because I think Scotland has always had it. If you look back to when, back in the 70s when you were watching football, you had all these wee blue cars around the field and stuff like that. You know, where the disabled people could drive in and you know could watch a football match, and you know, so it is more about bringing treating everybody equal. You know, which is at the ethos of the Scottish Government's social security plans. You know, everybody to be treated with dignity and respect.
Absolutely. And just finally, residents in Newloose, Wigtonshire are the first in Scotland to benefit from a programme to provide 4G to areas with no mobile coverage from any operator. The mast is one of up to 24 scheduled to be rolled out over the next 2 years, with further mast sites under consideration. Vodafone is now providing 4G, 3G and 2G services from the new mast. EE is expected to do so later this year and will provide service from a majority of sites in the programme. The Scottish 4G infill programme is backed by £15 million of Scottish Government funding and £10 million from the European Regional Development Fund. It was set up in 2018 to address Scotland's mobile not spots, areas with no mobile coverage, and is being delivered by WHP Telecoms, managed by the Scottish Futures Trust. And I mean, this is obviously, you know, good news that people are getting mobile coverage. Bad news that things like that £10 million of money from the European regional assistance
will no
longer be available.
Yeah, there was an interview that I latched on to a farmer. I think she was up in the Highlands and Islands or something like that, and she was saying that the acreage of our land, the mobile signal accessibility, you know, can vary from field to field, and when you're in an industry of that nature, where you know, I mean, obviously health and safety is you know paramount. It's vital that you have a means of communication,
contact,
and you know, I mean, 2G, 3G, 4G. You know, I mean, even some people survive on one bar. You know, is exactly what they can get. So it's interesting. I caught a small snippet of I think it was I think it was France. They were talking about that they were not willing to look into 5G. You know, because of its,
that's a whole other story.
Overarching intrusion and stuff like that.
That is a whole other story that we will, I'm sure, get into on another night. But we are out of time for tonight, so I would like to thank Chris very much for joining us.
No problem.
Always a pleasure. I'd like to thank you at home for joining us as well. If you would like to support Broadcasting Scotland financially, you can do so by going to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up as a supporter there. Your £5 a month will make a huge difference to everything that we can do here at Broadcasting Scotland. If you'd like to get involved in Broadcasting Scotland, we are always looking for volunteers. Particularly right now, we would love somebody with a bit of journalism experience or somebody who wants to get a bit of journalism experience to come in and help compile the stories, write the scripts that I'm reading out when we're on here. You don't think I just make all this up in my head, do you? And we'd also like to just remind you that we have now the Broadcasting Scotland app on the Amazon Fire Stick. So if you have one of those, do please give it a try. Let us know how you get on. You can always tweet us at Broadcast Scot to let us know how you're getting on with that, because we would love to hear how that app is working out for you. But until tomorrow, when Gordon will be back at the normal time, that is all we've got for you tonight. I've been Kenny McBride. Thank you again to Chris McCusker. Thank you to you for joining us. And until tomorrow, have a great evening.